The transmission should have been impossible. Quantum encryption protocols that had stood unbroken for centuries now danced around a signal originating from a small blue planet most considered a technological backwater. In the cascading holographic chamber of the Galactic Council, time seemed to pause. Ambassador Krell's dismissive gesture froze midair as the data stream continued to pulse, a rhythmic challenge to everything they believed they understood. Elena Rodriguez wasn't aware she was changing the course of galactic history. She was simply doing her job, analyzing deep space communication patterns at the Integrated Research Nexus in Nevada. Her workspace was a controlled chaos of holographic displays, quantum processors, and half-empty coffee mugs. Scattered notes covered every available surface, each representing fragments of a puzzle she was determined to solve. The signal had first appeared 3 weeks ago. Anomalous, intricate, impossible to classify using standard sinolinguistic algorithms. Most researchers would have filed it away as background noise. But Elena was different. Her team was a collection of brilliant misfits. Dr. James Okoro, a quantum communications specialist who had been rejected by every major research institution for being too unconventional. Maya Chen, a computational linguist who could decode patterns others couldn't even perceive. And Rafael Santos, an engineer who could build working prototypes from what most would consider electronic garbage. "Look at this," Elena muttered, her fingers dancing across multiple holographic interfaces. The signal wasn't just a transmission. It was a complex tapestry of information that seemed to reshape itself with each analysis. In the Galactic Council chambers, Ambassador Krell's diplomatic team continued their routine dismissal. The Unified Stellar Confederation had spent millennia categorizing emerging species. Humans were just another entry in their vast database. Primitive, fractious, technologically immature. They were wrong. Back in the Nevada facility, Elena's quantum processor began to overheat. The signal was doing something unprecedented. It was adapting. Each time the team attempted to analyze its structure, the transmission would subtly shift, revealing new layers of complexity. "This isn't random," Maya whispered, her dark eyes reflecting the cascading data patterns. "This is deliberate." James leaned in, his dark skin glistening with a thin layer of nervous sweat. "Deliberate how? It's changing faster than our most advanced decryption algorithms can track." Raphael was already pulling components from various devices, his mind racing with possibilities. "We need a new approach, something that doesn't just try to decode the signal, but understands its fundamental nature." Outside the research facility, the world continued its routine. Solar farms stretched across rehabilitated desert landscapes. Vertical agricultural towers dominated city skylines. Humanity had transformed its own planet through necessity, developing technologies that blended sustainability with innovation. The team worked through the night. Coffee machines emptied and refilled. Holographic displays flickered with increasingly complex algorithmic models. They weren't just trying to understand a transmission. They were attempting to communicate with something fundamentally different from anything humanity had encountered. As dawn broke, casting golden light across the Nevada desert, Elena made a decision that would echo through galactic history. She would not report this through standard channels. The signal was too important, too potentially transformative to be lost in bureaucratic red tape. What they didn't know, what they couldn't know, was that the transmission was more than a message. It was a test, a probe, a first tentative touch between civilizations that would reshape understanding of communication, technology, and potential. The Galactic Council would learn. Humanity was not what they assumed. Not even close. The research facility looked unremarkable from the outside. A low-slung building nestled in the rehabilitated Nevada desert, surrounded by solar arrays and wind turbines that glinted like metallic sentinels under the harsh sunlight. Inside, something extraordinary was taking shape. Dr. Elena Rodriguez stood before a device that defied conventional understanding. The quantum entanglement prototype wasn't just a machine. It was a bridge between impossible concepts. Delicate quantum filaments suspended in a crystalline matrix pulsed with an almost living energy, each thread representing potential beyond human comprehension. "We're close," she muttered, more to herself than to her team. Her fingers traced holographic interfaces, each movement precise, calculated. Dr. James Okoro approached, a steaming cup of coffee in hand. "Close to what, exactly?" "We've been close for months now." His skepticism was sharp, but there was an underlying current of excitement he couldn't quite suppress. The facility's history was as unconventional as its current project. Born from the ashes of global climate disasters, it represented humanity's most radical response to near extinction. When rising sea levels, extreme weather, and resource scarcity had pushed civilization to the brink, something remarkable happened. Nations that had been enemies for centuries suddenly found themselves working together, not out of friendship, but pure survival. Maya Chen was reviewing data streams, her fingers moving so quickly they seemed to blur. "The quantum resonance is different today," she said quietly. "Something's changed." Rafael Santos looked up from a disassembled communication array. His workspace was a controlled chaos of components, each piece carefully cataloged but seemingly random to an untrained eye. "Define different," he challenged. Before Maya could respond, an alarm triggered. Not a loud, invasive sound, but a subtle pulse that seemed to vibrate through the very structure of the building. The quantum prototype's crystalline matrix began to shift, creating patterns that defied standard geometric principles. Outside, global communication networks experienced a momentary flutter. Satellites blinked. Data streams rippled. For a fraction of a second, something fundamental changed. Alina's breath caught. This was more than an experiment. This was a conversation with the unknown. The facility represented more than a research center. It was a testament to humanity's transformed approach to challenges. Where previous generations might have responded with conflict, this team represented a new paradigm: collaborative, adaptive, relentlessly curious. "Power stabilization is holding," James announced, his earlier skepticism replaced by pure scientific enthusiasm. "Quantum coherence at 89.7% and rising." Raphael moved to a secondary console, hands flying across interfaced projections. "Energy consumption is within predicted parameters. But these readings, they're not just outside our previous models. They're creating new models." Maya's voice was soft, but filled with wonder. "We're not just observing something. We're communicating with something." The prototype continued its dance of quantum potentials. Complex mathematical representations transformed in real time, creating patterns that resembled living systems more than mechanical constructs. What they didn't realize, what they couldn't yet comprehend, was that the device was more than an experimental communication tool. It was a key, a bridge, a first tentative handshake with something far beyond human understanding. Outside, the desert wind shifted. Solar arrays adjusted imperceptibly. Communication networks hummed with potential. Humanity was preparing to take its next evolutionary step, and nothing would ever be the same. The deep space research vessel Kelrick's Horizon drifted through the dark expanse, its quantum sensors probing the intricate fabric of spacetime. Captain Lyra Soren watched the holographic displays with a mixture of professional detachment and growing unease. Something was different. The anomalous readings had started 3 standard cycles ago. Subtle at first, just minor fluctuations that most researchers would have dismissed as background radiation or sensor interference. But Lyra was not most researchers. Her crew represented the pinnacle of Kelrick's scientific achievement. Senior researcher Vex, a multisensory being whose cognitive processes spanned multiple neural networks, hunched over a series of quantum interface displays. "These patterns," Vex murmured, "multiple sensory tendrils shifting in complex mathematical configurations, they do not conform to any known stellar communication model." Navigation Officer Krell studied the star charts, his crystalline exoskeleton refracting soft blue light across the vessel's observation deck. "The origin point is problematic," he announced. "These signals are emanating from a sector typically classified as a developing system. Specifically, the third planet of an unremarkable solar cluster, Earth. Back on the research facility in Nevada, Dr. Elena Rodriguez had no idea her team's quantum prototype was creating ripples that stretched across galactic communication networks. The device continued its complex dance of potential, each pulse sending out intricate information patterns that defied conventional understanding. "We're receiving something," Maya Chen whispered, her fingers hovering over quantum interface displays. The data streams were unlike anything in human communication archives. Not a language, not a code. Something more fundamental. A living communication. Rafael Santos began reconstructing the signal's mathematical foundation. Each time he thought he understood its structure, the pattern would shift, adapting, responding, evolving faster than any computational model could track. On the Kelric's horizon, Captain Lyra Soren made a decision that would echo through diplomatic channels. "We are not reporting this through standard communication protocols," she told her senior staff. The implications were too significant, too potentially transformative to be lost in bureaucratic channels. Vexa's multiple sensory tendrils pulsed with complex mathematical representations. The signal suggests an intelligence far beyond our current classification models. It is not just communication. It is adaptation. The vessel's quantum communication array began to resonate, not with a traditional transmission, but with something more nuanced. A probe. A question disguised as a mathematical sequence. Back on Earth, the research team had no concept of the galactic scale investigation their prototype was generating. They were focused on understanding, on breaking through the next computational barrier. Dr. James Okoro reviewed the latest data sets, his dark eyes reflecting complex holographic projections. "These aren't random signals," he muttered. "This is a conversation." But with what? Outside the research facility, the world continued its transformation. Vertical agricultural towers dominated city skylines. Sustainable energy networks pulsed with efficient complexity. Humanity had learned to adapt, to transform, to survive against impossible odds. The quantum prototype continued its intricate dance. Each pulse sent out a message, a complex mathematical invitation to something waiting in the vast darkness between stars. Something was listening. Something was preparing to respond. And humanity had no idea of the profound conversation about to unfold. The laboratory fell silent, not the quiet of emptiness, but the expectant hush of imminent revelation. Dr. Elena Rodriguez stood motionless, her eyes fixed on the quantum prototype. The device no longer looked like a machine. It breathed. It pulsed. It existed in a state that blurred the line between technology and living system. "This is impossible," Dr. James Okoro whispered, but his voice carried no conviction of impossibility. Only wonder. The energy transmission prototype had become something more than their original design. Where they had intended to create a communication device, they had instead birthed a bridge between known and unknown realities. Maya Chen's fingers danced across holographic interfaces, tracking data streams that seemed to defy fundamental physical laws. Mathematical models collapsed and reformed with each passing second. The prototype was not just transmitting information, it was generating new frameworks of understanding. "We're not observing," Maya muttered. "We're participating." Rafael Santos had long since abandoned traditional engineering approaches. His workspace was a controlled chaos of quantum components, each piece carefully selected, each connection a potential pathway to something extraordinary. Outside the research facility, the world continued its quiet transformation. Sustainable cities rose from previously damaged landscapes. Energy networks pulsed with unprecedented efficiency. Humanity had learned to adapt, to reimagine potential with each passing decade. The prototype's quantum matrix began to shift, not randomly, but with a precision that suggested intention. Complex geometric patterns formed and dissolved, creating mathematical languages that existed beyond human comprehension. On the Kelric's horizon, light years away, Captain Lyra Soren watched her own sensor arrays respond to the distant transmission. Quantum entanglement created unexpected connections, bridges between seemingly impossible points in space-time. Researcher Vex, she called. Are you seeing this? Vex's multiple sensory tendrils pulsed with mathematical excitement. The signal from the small blue planet was more than a transmission. It was an invitation, a challenge, a fundamental reimagining of communication itself. Back in the Nevada facility, Dr. Rodriguez realized they had crossed a threshold. This was not just a scientific breakthrough. This was an evolutionary moment. We're communicating, she said softly, but not with words, not with traditional signals. The prototype continued its dance. Each pulse generated new potential. Each moment created possibilities that moments before would have been considered pure fantasy. Dr. Okoro reviewed the data streams, his scientific skepticism overwhelmed by pure scientific wonder. We're not just sending information, he realized. We're creating a new language of potential. Raphael moved between quantum interfaces, his movements precise, calculated. He was no longer just an engineer. He was a translator between known and unknown realities. Maya's computational models began to shift. The prototype was generating information faster than any known computational system could process. It was learning, adapting, evolving with each microsecond of existence. The facility's environmental systems adjusted imperceptibly. Power networks recalibrated. Communication arrays hummed with potential. Something fundamental was changing. Humanity was preparing to take its next evolutionary step, and nothing would ever be the same. The quantum prototype pulsed, a mathematical heartbeat, an invitation to something waiting in the vast darkness between known realities. Something was listening. Something was preparing to respond. The global economic network never saw it coming. What began as a quantum communication prototype in a small Nevada research facility was now transforming systems far beyond its original design. Financial markets trembled. Technology platforms rewrote themselves. Entire industrial ecosystems began to shift with a fluidity that defied traditional understanding. Dr. Elena Rodriguez watched the global data streams with a mixture of scientific fascination and growing concern. The quantum prototype had become something more than a research project. It was a catalyst. In the heart of Singapore's financial district, a young economist named Lin Wei stared at her holographic displays in disbelief. Economic models that had stood unshaken for decades were collapsing, reforming, creating new paradigms of value and exchange. "This is impossible," she muttered, her fingers racing across quantum interfaces. But it was happening. The prototype's influence spread like a living network. Energy production transformed overnight. Sustainable technologies that had been decades away from practical implementation suddenly became not just possible, but inevitable. Dr. James Okoro reviewed global infrastructure reports, his scientific mind struggling to comprehend the scale of transformation. "We're not just changing technology," he told Maya Chen. "We're rewriting the fundamental language of human potential." Maya's computational models danced with new possibilities. The quantum prototype was more than a device. It was a bridge between known limitations and unexplored potential. Across the planet, research centers that had been working in isolation suddenly found themselves connected. Computational barriers dissolved. Scientific understanding accelerated at an exponential rate. On the Kelrick's horizon, Captain Lyra Soren watched her long-range sensors with increasing amazement. The small blue planet was generating communication patterns that defied every established galactic model. "Researcher Vex," she called. "Are you seeing this?" Vex's multiple sensory tendrils pulsed with mathematical excitement. The signal from Earth was unlike anything in their extensive galactic archives. Not a traditional communication, not a weapon. Something far more dangerous, a living system of potential. Rafael Santos had long since stopped thinking like a traditional engineer. His workspace was a testament to radical reimagination. Components that should have been incompatible now sang together in complex harmonic systems. Global communication networks began to shift, not through traditional digital pathways, but through something more fundamental. A living network that adapted, learned, transformed with each passing moment. Startup collectives emerged from unexpected locations. A research team in Lagos developed an energy storage system that made previous technologies look like ancient curiosities. A group of young engineers in Mumbai created computational models that rewrote understanding of quantum communication. The quantum prototype continued its silent revolution. Traditional power structures found themselves obsolete. Companies that had dominated global markets for decades suddenly became relics. Innovation was no longer a linear process. It had become a living, breathing ecosystem. Dr. Rodriguez understood something profound was happening. This was more than a technological breakthrough. This was an evolutionary moment for humanity. We're not just changing how we communicate, she told her team. We're changing what it means to be human. The world watched, uncertain, excited, terrified. Something extraordinary was emerging, and nothing would ever be the same. The Galactic Council's emergency session looked nothing like its usual carefully orchestrated meetings. Holographic displays flickered with chaotic data streams. Representatives from hundreds of stellar civilizations watched in collective disbelief as the information from Earth continued to defy every established protocol. Ambassador Krell of the Unified Stellar Confederation stood at the center of the chamber, his tentacled form rippling with nervous energy. "We cannot allow this to continue," he declared, his translation matrix turning his words into a dozen different linguistic patterns. But they were already too late. In the Nevada Research Facility, Dr. Elena Rodriguez and her team had no idea of the galactic-scale panic they were generating. The quantum prototype continued its silent revolution, adapting faster than any system could comprehend. Dr. James Okoro reviewed the latest global impact reports. Entire industries had been transformed overnight. Energy production systems that had been centuries old collapsed, replaced by technologies that seemed to emerge from pure potential. "We're not just changing technology," he muttered to Maya Chen. "We're rewriting the fundamental language of human capability." Maya's computational models danced with new possibilities. Each attempt to restrict or contain the prototype's influence seemed to generate even more innovative pathways. The Galactic Council's initial response was predictable. Diplomatic channels began to construct barriers. Economic sanctions were drafted. Communication restrictions were proposed. But humanity had changed. Where previous generations might have responded with conflict, the global research community saw an opportunity. Collaborative networks emerged across national boundaries. Research centers that had been competitors now worked together with unprecedented synchronization. Rafael Santos had transformed his approach to engineering. His workspace was a living laboratory of possibility. Components that should have been incompatible now worked together in complex, adaptive systems. On the Kelrix horizon, Captain Lyra Soren watched her long-range sensors with a mixture of terror and excitement. The small blue planet was generating communication patterns that defied every established galactic model. "Researcher Vex," she called. "Are you analyzing this?" Vex's multiple sensory tendrils pulsed with mathematical excitement. The signal from Earth was unlike anything in their extensive galactic archives. Not a traditional communication, not a weapon. Something far more dangerous. A living system of potential. Global communication networks began to shift, not through traditional digital pathways, but through something more fundamental. A network that adapted, learned, transformed with each passing moment. The Galactic Council's attempts to contain humanity only accelerated the transformation. Each diplomatic barrier became a challenge. Each economic sanction transformed into an innovation catalyst. Dr. Rodriguez understood something profound was happening. This was more than a technological breakthrough. This was an evolutionary moment for humanity. "We're not just changing how we communicate," she told her team. "We're changing what it means to be human." Startup collectives emerged from unexpected locations. A research team in Nairobi developed an energy transmission system that made previous technologies look like ancient curiosities. A group of young engineers in Buenos Aires created computational models that rewrote understanding of quantum communication. The quantum prototype continued its silent revolution. Traditional power structures found themselves obsolete. Civilizations that had dominated galactic interactions for millennia suddenly became uncertain. Innovation was no longer a linear process. It had become a living, breathing ecosystem. The world watched, uncertain, excited, terrified. Something extraordinary was emerging, and nothing would ever be the same. The revolution happened in moments most would consider unremarkable. A quantum signal pulsed through communication networks. Research centers that had been isolated suddenly found themselves connected by invisible threads of potential. The transformation was not violent. It was not dramatic. It was a quiet, relentless reimagining of possibility. Dr. Elena Rodriguez watched the global data streams with a mixture of scientific fascination and profound uncertainty. The quantum prototype had become something far beyond their original design. A living system of communication. A bridge between known and unknown realities. "We're not just sending information," she told her team. "We're creating a new language of existence." On the Kelrick's horizon, Captain Lyra Soren tracked the unprecedented communication patterns emerging from the small blue planet. Researcher Vex's sensory tendrils pulsed with mathematical excitement. The signal from Earth defied every established galactic communication model. "It's not a message," Vex observed, multiple cognitive processes analyzing the data streams. "It's an invitation." Global systems began to shift. Energy networks recalibrated. Communication pathways transformed. Technologies that had been decades away from implementation suddenly became not just possible, but inevitable. Dr. James Okoro reviewed computational models that seemed to generate themselves. Traditional scientific understanding collapsed and reformed with each passing moment. The boundaries between disciplines dissolved. Physics merged with biology. Computational theory intertwined with quantum mechanics. Maya Chen's research team discovered communication patterns that suggested something profound. The quantum prototype was not just transmitting information. It was learning, adapting, evolving. In research centers across the planet, something extraordinary was happening. Collaborative networks emerged that transcended national boundaries. A researcher in Lagos would solve a computational challenge that a team in Mumbai had been struggling with. A sustainable energy breakthrough in Buenos Aires would immediately inform similar research in Seoul. Rafael Santos had transformed his approach to engineering. His workspace was a living laboratory of possibility. Components that should have been incompatible now worked together in complex, adaptive systems. The Galactic Council watched in collective disbelief. Diplomatic channels that had stood unbroken for millennia now seemed like relics of a forgotten age. The small blue planet was generating communication patterns that rewrote fundamental understanding of intelligence, potential, and connection. Ambassador Krell of the Unified Stellar Confederation found himself obsolete. The diplomatic strategies that had defined galactic interactions for generations now seemed hopelessly inadequate. Startup collectives emerged from unexpected locations. A team of young researchers in Jakarta developed a quantum communication system that made previous technologies look like ancient curiosities. Engineers in Nairobi created adaptive computational models that suggested entirely new approaches to problem solving. The quantum prototype continued its silent revolution. Traditional power structures dissolved. Economic systems that had dominated global interactions for decades became irrelevant. Innovation was no longer a linear process. It had become a living, breathing ecosystem of potential. Dr. Rodriguez understood something profound was happening. This was more than a technological breakthrough. This was an evolutionary moment for humanity. "We're rewriting what it means to be connected," she told her team. "We're creating a new language of existence." The world watched, uncertain, excited, transformed. Something extraordinary was emerging, and nothing would ever be the same. Humanity had become something more than itself, a living network of potential, a bridge between known and unknown realities. Time became a different concept. The quantum prototype had transformed from a scientific experiment into something that defied traditional understanding. It was no longer just a device. It was a living bridge between realities, a connection that stretched beyond human comprehension. Dr. Elena Rodriguez stood in the research facility, watching as the world around her continued to reshape itself. The boundaries between disciplines, between nations, between species had dissolved. "We're not just changing technology," she whispered. "We're changing the fundamental nature of connection." On the Kelrick's horizon, Captain Lyra Soren tracked the unprecedented transformation. Researcher Vex's sensory tendrils pulsed with a combination of mathematical excitement and profound uncertainty. The signal from Earth had become something more than a communication network. It was a living system of potential. Ambassador Krell of the Unified Stellar Confederation found himself a relic of a past era. The diplomatic strategies that had defined galactic interactions for millennia now seemed like primitive artifacts. Humanity had not conquered through traditional means. They had simply outgrown the existing systems. Dr. James Okoro reviewed computational models that seemed to generate themselves. Traditional scientific understanding had collapsed and reformed countless times. Physics merged with biology. Computational theory intertwined with quantum mechanics. The very concept of disciplinary boundaries had become obsolete. Maya Chen's research team discovered communication patterns that suggested something profound. The quantum prototype was not just transmitting information. It was creating new frameworks of understanding. Each moment generated possibilities that moments before would have been considered pure fantasy. Global systems continued their quiet transformation. Energy networks adapted with unprecedented efficiency. Communication pathways became living, breathing ecosystems of potential. Research centers across the planet worked with a synchronization that defied previous understanding of collaboration. Rafael Santos had long since stopped thinking like a traditional engineer. His workspace was a testament to radical reimagination. Components that should have been incompatible now worked together in complex, adaptive systems that seemed to breathe with their own intelligence. The Galactic Council's attempts to understand or contain humanity had become meaningless. The small blue planet had generated communication patterns that rewrote fundamental understanding of intelligence, potential, and connection. Startup collectives emerged and transformed with breathtaking speed. A team of researchers in Mumbai would solve a computational challenge that simultaneously informed work in Lagos, Buenos Aires, and Seoul. The concept of isolated research had become a distant memory. The quantum prototype continued its silent evolution. Traditional power structures had dissolved completely. Economic systems that had dominated global interactions for decades became irrelevant. Innovation was no longer a linear process. It had become a living, breathing ecosystem of potential that expanded faster than any computational model could track. Dr. Rodriguez understood something profound had happened. This was more than a technological breakthrough. This was an evolutionary moment that transformed what it meant to be human, to be intelligent, to be connected. "We're creating a new language of existence," she told her team. "A bridge between known and unknown realities." On the Kelrick's horizon, Vex's final computational analysis captured the essence of the transformation. Humanity was not a species. It was a process of potential, a living network of adaptation, a bridge between what was and what could be. The world watched, transformed. Something extraordinary had emerged, and nothing would ever be the same. Humanity had become something more than itself, a living network of infinite potential, a bridge between known and unknown realities.